Hello guys, my name is Stefan and I am a software developer on the WATS project. And today I will guide you through this webinar on manual inspection. Start off by logging into your WATS account. When you've logged in, you will be taken to the WATS main menu. From here you can navigate between the different WATS modules, and today we will start off by entering the control panel module. Once loaded, navigate to the manual inspection tab on the left hand side. You will now be taken to the Mess Manager view. Here you can create and design test sequences that are used to execute manual inspections. In this video, we will create two types of sequences. A global sequence, which essentially is just a sequence that can be used within other sequences, and a test sequence that we will use for the manual inspection itself. For that sake, we'll start off by creating a new folder. I will name this folder Manual Inspection Test. So make sure that you navigate to the folder and select New Sequence. First sequence called Global, and the second sequence called Test Sequence. At this stage, you select the green button that says Design. And make sure that you install the designer, which is required to be able to design test sequences. Once downloaded, open it and run it. So once you have the installer installed, select the Open button from the dialog window. This will download the file, and when you click it, it will open the file in the Sequence Designer view. On the left hand side, you have the sequence outline displayed. In the center, you can toggle between the designer view and the SAML view. And on the right hand side, you have the toolbox, which contains the different steps available to the sequence. So for the sake of simplicity, we'll just use a couple of pass-fail steps to this global sequence. So we'll just add a couple of those onto the sequence, which you can just drag and drop. And we'll click this button to open up the dialog where we can edit the different steps. So let's just say that this first step is label attached. And the second one is visuals. Okay. So at this stage, you can just click the Save Sequence button and you will get a message. At this time, you can just close the Sequence Designer. So we're back here. And what you should do next is to toggle the Global Sequence slider. This indicates that the sequence is able to be used inside other sequences. One more thing that you should do is that you should move the sequence from draft to pending, which will enable the sequence to be used in other sequences as well. So you have to complete those two steps in order to use this sequence in another sequence. Let's design the test sequence now. So select it and click the Design button once more. Click Open the sequence, which will make a file download, and just click it once more to open the Sequence Designer again. The first thing you should do when designing a new test sequence is to open up the test sequence settings. And the first parameter you will see is the media URL parameter. So when you're executing a manual inspection, you will have a web viewer component at the execution view. And this web viewer component can pretty much include anything. So let's say that you have a PDF file containing test instructions for the given sequence. You can simply insert the URL into this field, and then you can map up the different pages related to the different test steps later on. It also have a table for the unit under test and unit under repair miscellaneous fields. So if you want to specify some miscellaneous information, you can simply do it in this table. So misc info test, and we'll say that pretty much anything goes, and we'll set it to active. There we go. And we can close it. So This will then be our sequence settings for this particular sequence. Let's take a look at some more step types now. And we'll start off by looking at the test step types: numeric limit, pass-fail, and string value. So the first one will be the numeric limit one. And when we open up the settings, we see that we have two types of settings or parameters. We have the ones which are linked to the test itself, and we have one set which are linked more to the manual inspection side and is generic for most step types. So for numeric limits, we have the low limit, high limit, units, and the comp operator, which you can specify. Now let's take a look at some more generic step parameters. And the first one is image attachment. This specifies whether or not an image is required to be attached to the step before the step can be submitted. And you can specify required, optional, or never. You also have a media URL, which, if present, takes priority over the sequence media URL. Next up, you have the PDF search string. If you enter a search string, WATS will try to look up the search string and provide the page number in the media URL which the search string is present. And the same goes for the PDF page number. If you specify page number, WATS will try and navigate to that page in the web viewer. Lastly, you have a description, which is a description for the step. Maybe you have test instructions or that sort of stuff, which you can enter here in the description field. Now let's take a look at the pass-fail step, which we used in our global sequence earlier. So as you can see, this step is pretty basic. You can specify a step name, and you can tick off whether or not pass all should be affected. And the next step is the string value step. Once again, you have the step name, but this time you also have a limit, which can either be a string or a regular expression if you tick off this checkbox. So that's more or less done with the test steps. Now let's take a look at the action steps. So the first action step we'll take a look at is the wait step. So this is more or less just a countdown timer where you specify a duration and it will count down from the specified duration once the step initializes. The second action step is the set process step. Please note that this step is only available if you are running mesh configuration with WATS. And what this does is that it takes the unit which you have scanned in the operator interface and changes the process to the provided process in the list. Lastly, we have the attach file step. And this requires a file to be attached, and you can provide the extension and the filter name. And that does it for the sequence designer. Let's start executing a manual inspection. So the first thing that you should do is that you should navigate to this website, which will be linked in the video description below. This is an article about designing manual inspection sequences. And at the bottom of this article, you will find a test sequence SAML, which you can download. Simply just copy the SAML into the sequence designer in the SAML view and press save. At this point, we will have a workable test sequence which we will use. As we remember, we created a global sequence earlier. So now is the time to apply it to this sequence. We can just select the global sequence which we created earlier. And now we just press save and our sequence is ready. Now that our sequence has been designed, it's time to set it up. And the first thing we do is that we move it from draft to pending. We'll leave as much of the settings as default and we'll come back to them later. So the first thing we do now is that we add a new row in the condition table. So we'll set the relation type to anything and we'll specify some test operations. So these will be different from you guys based on what test operations you have specified or created. So this is pretty much it. We now have our design sequence and it has been set up and ready to use for manual inspection execution. What we need to do at this stage is to navigate to the operator interface. And then we have to go to the configuration, in advanced configuration. You see, we have a section for manual inspections in the configuration in operator interface, where you can specify the sequence status, and you have to make sure that this status matches the status of your sequence. So once it's set to pending, we're all good, and we can start typing down pretty much anything, because we specified that the part number could be pretty much anything. When we scan in these units, we click manual inspection, and once it's finished loading, you can see that you can create a sequence with the different test operations which is specified. So we'll just go with this one. So here we are in the manual inspection execution view. So you have the option to specify some header information for UUT and UUR reports, as well as start the test. For now, we'll just start the test, which will take you to the next view and initialize the sequence. So on the left hand side, you see that we have the sequence, we have the input fields in the center, and we have our test instructions on the right hand side, which is set up in our sequence. So the first step is a numeric limit step, which has a low limit of 5, high limit of 10, and a comparison type of greater equal and lower than. So let's just insert an input 7. So as you can see at this stage, I am not able to confirm the step, and this is due to that the step requires at least one attached image, which this message indicates, which requires you to upload at least one image to the step. So this can be done through a web camera, a file, or you can manage the files which you have uploaded. So I'll just upload a simple file, and you see that the confirm button lights up. Since the value was within the limits, it passed, and it took us to the next step. So let's just complete this sequence. This string value test requires a regex or an email address which is valid through a regex. So just use our email. Here you see an example of the wait step, which is basically the countdown. So during this time, we are able to navigate through different steps, but we can also choose to wait. Now it's completed, and you see that action steps will have a blue check mark, and test steps will have a green check mark. So the set process step is just a confirm, which activates the attach file step. So once again, we'll just upload a photo or any other file and close the dialog. Now we are at our end of the test sequence, which is the global sequence we attached. So label is attached, pass and visuals, okay. So now that our sequence has been completed, you will see the submit button lights up. But before we submit, let's just insert a unit under test comment, which will be visible in the unit under test report, which will be generated from the sequence. So test comments. Also, let's fill out some miscellaneous information. MISC1 value and MISC2 value. And now we can just simply submit the manual inspection execution, which will take us to the serial number history tab. And from here, we can navigate to the report. So as you can see, we have our readings, our measurements, our information here, as well as the string limit for the email address. So now that we have successfully completed our first manual inspection, let's take a look at some sequence settings. So the first settings is the repair on failed settings, which allows you to do inline repairs within manual inspection if a step were to fail. And you can specify never, optional, or required. And we'll set this to optional for the sake of this example. Also, all units which are tested with this sequence can get a static repair operation in case the test were to fail. So we can also specify that. Earlier we looked into the global toggle view, which basically enables the sequence to be used within other sequences. We also have a add subunits, which we can check, which allows you to add subunits to the unit which are under manual inspection. And we can also submit UUT and UUR report on first failed test step, which will not allow the operator to do further testing or further manual inspection on the sequence if a step fails. So let's just activate those two as well. And we'll go back into the operator interface and try with the new unit. So let's say test 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 this time. And we'll select a manual inspection once again. So once we load manual inspection execution now, you see that you have a subunit grid. So let's just add a subunits. So my operator interface is configured to look for products which has been defined in the products manager in the control panel. So I'll just use one. Simple as that. I will also show you after this walkthrough how you select the different operator interface settings. You can also see that the repair operation has been statically set to repair, which we did in our sequence. So let's start the test and let's just get this one over with. Let's see, let's say this steps works and we get a valid value, but then this one fails. You see that the sequence locks and the repair dialog opens up. So you have the option to submit the report at this moment, but you have also the option to complete a repair. So let's say that label is not there. And then we submit the failure. We can now submit the report, which will take us back into serial number history, and we will get a repair report and a unit under test report. So we already looked at the unit under test report, so let's look at the repair report. So as you can see here, we have our category, code, step name, and comments. And we'll also have our images if we were to attach an image. So that's pretty much it. Now for the operator interface settings, if you go to advanced configuration, you see that you have these mess settings, and this pretty much controls how manual inspection and operator interface in general reacts to failure of sequences and that sort of thing. So if mess product is enabled, it will only look for products in the subunit grids. If it is disabled, you can pretty much add anything in the subunit grid that is not included in the product manager. If mess production is enabled, you basically are running mess, and that will also change a fair bit how the manual inspection actually works. And that pretty much does it for this webinar. If there are any questions, you can post it in the comments below, or you can contact us on our support forums. And also you can just continue playing around with the different sequence settings and test what works for you in your situation. So thank you for watching this webinar, and have a nice day.